All right, so I gave you guys sort of the tour of my book in the beginning, right? We had, all these expositions of shapes and whatnot. And then I said we wouldn't be here for long, because unless I decided to just basically do nothing, then there were obviously going to be changes that were made. Perhaps even mistakes were going to be made, and this perfect sort of clean entrance into these tanned pages was going to be missed. And I did just that today, and I sort of opened up with something that I will not read verbatim, and that is because it was more of like a practice. And all it was a whole page filled with the words, "These are the first lines in this book, mark in quotations, comma, or are they?" So sort of like, an operation, kind of like an operational line, used to kind of create like some space there at the very beginning where I'm about to kind of open up, kind of like, an OS kind of thing that creates some command which kind of all things branch out from or whatever, which can either be used to go back a certain amount of time, and contemplate other things, or go forward. And then so I just sort of opened up on the next page with writing about where I am right now, because I felt that I was able to do so. And to kind of go over a little bit of what I wrote on anyways was just, sort of a grand expose on my accumulated skills up to this point of being able to sort of write on mundane topics and maybe perhaps get you to think about something in some way with just perhaps maybe a little bit more depth, and then to jump back up to the surface for a moment to realize its connection with everything else, and then to sort of let it be and to kind of let go and walk away from the moment. And so I started again with kind of writing about where I was. So I sit in a park facing east towards the now snow-capped mountains. I wonder if they will be snow-capped now until next spring. I wonder what makes one able to wonder, or have no wonder, and wonder which one is more accepting of what is. Surely it is a matter of wonder. Truly, is it not both no wonder and wonder if I say it as so? For it is directly a matter of wonder as a subject, which is no wonder if you look as so. Where then you could say it is a matter of wonder how wonder has no wonder, which leads to reason. Bullet number 1. Now look at the spelling of wonder. And at this point in time, it looked pretty weird. And a lot of times words will do that if you create them in these sort of dramatic word plays. It sort of breaks the word apart so much that once you write it kind of one more time, it looks odd and foreign, like you're seeing it for the very first time, like you almost don't know it, which is sort of true because you're trying to understand it more. Bullet number 2, wonder is an accepting of something. Bullet number 3, no wonder is an accepting of something. Bullet number 4, in the relatedness of words. And this was basically what the rest of my writing was on, was this and its relatedness to other words. Wonder isn't so much truth that it forgets to think, although one could say that wonderful thinking is more a game, and thinking true is more accepting, though I say that we truly get to cause that wonder has some play with the truth. though I say that we truly get to cause, that wonder has some play with the truth. And what I mean right there is that we're getting to the idea of cause itself. That is that to understand cause, if you only focus, let's say, on truth, you will never understand that life can have different focuses, which might be more true if we say that the truth matters at all. For then if we say that all life is associated with what you consider work, is it the response that makes work close to cause, or no response, which allows you to see that the focus changes if you really remain true, which is a sort of wonder, and that is its play. I would also like to say that there is a certain relatedness to imagination. That writing, I have 4 states, imagination, there is always something behind it to know, which brings me to the ultimate point of all things, which by sense of urgency is that some words are more used than others, and these words are of more ideals, I believe, which could be more potential, which is the point of all things, but time and its allotment is an obvious for their usage. Where I think they equate with potential when I say confidence allows truth to be a focus, that potential causes movement. The obvious question then becomes if this is a skill, a talent, or a work that are realities that actually create separation in time for experience, what means that decisions and their consequences are a sort of negative wonder, in that they have a similar feeling to what is felt in the beginning. But with enough experience, does focus change or stay the same? If we again say that to be broad is better, maybe we do use the word negative wonder at some time, so that we feel that all things are the same, that we say that decisions do not lead to separation. Ultimately, to ascertain this writing, knowing that I am mostly writing on the feeling of thoughts as they come, as again in thinking true, to catch a thought is again like how much time we have to say we are living a word. When potential and time mix, we make decisions, and I am susceptible to that as I write, but it might help a reader to know that that is how I am writing, now to know how to connect the thoughts, which is where I came up with negative wonder, and how to compare wonder to truth. We can then notice for a moment, as a word became in its style here, as I used it to bring things back into perspective, as I said to say it like that instead of a decision, made everything the same again, so then perhaps wonder was normal for a moment, and not something so extreme that everyone or everything had, which maybe truly is more like life anyway. But though it is with this use and how you can say that sadness passed like youth, but it was innocence, and we were able to move with a shield or take something with us, which makes sadness more a moment lost in time than losing something to wonder. I brought up sadness because that is the plight of all things being a game and not a game. There is either something to miss out on or to lose either way, and sometimes the only way to deal with it is to be real, which is to say you have lost or come up with something new, as any idea gets closer or further away from the truth. These emotions are obviously present. I also think of the saying no imagination, which has more opposite to imagination than no wonder has to wonder, and wonder if that is just this time or if it will always be like that. That no wonder is still a sort of imaginative word, that is. And then my last 2 bullets. No wonder and wonder are obviously then plays on how much time or commitment a thing has. And the final bullet was, again, though, for who has all the time, there is always another direction to go. Always. But do you go anywhere? And that's how you get the pen rolling. And I said that because I have this hexagonal sort of like magic 8-ball pen. And I just figured, you know what, if I use it almost to the, like when things are labeled like that, I feel like as long as I basically keep up the momentum of how I've used things in the past, it's going to equate out to basically be statistically, the same as me rolling something of chance and rolling something of no chance, which was the topic that I spoke of yesterday, or a couple days ago, regarding the Roman dodecahedron. So again, this was just sort of a little bit of play on that word, and how to sort of take something to the brink and kind of like back again, you know, like baptizing the word or something like that. Maybe in a lot of ways that was my baptism of this this book. Here, I'll show you the pen right now too. That was my baptizing this book, as it were. But as you can see, it's got all these words on it and symbols or whatever, you know. You could roll it if you wanted to and, you know, ask it for fortune, but I figure that it's going to basically play out sort of all those things as I sort of roll the pen, as I stated, kind of with, you know, doing this anyways. And there's as much mystery and skill if you take skill always to the point of where you have nothing left to give, you know, which is where work and luck and talent and all these things can play out in. Because again, if you take decision, which is just luck again, you take choice and you take all this stuff to the point of as to where you've given everything you have, then they're all sort of the same kind of word. They all kind of carry a lot of the similar meaning to each other. And then you can sort of rest easy, you know, with kind of knowing what you've done. But yes, even, you know, work, and a lot of times the wonder and mystery with work comes in the form of competition and things with how the world, you know, and then there's just so much to wonder about, you know, in regards to our place and the importance of everything and all of that. But, you know, sort of again, to just kind of run through it, I tried to analyze the world of the word itself, and it just seemed like the word was much more of a privilege at times to be able to wonder when we consider realities. But I figured that in reality, there is practically no way, you know what I mean, in which we understand the necessity of reality without there being words. And perhaps by using some idea such as negative wonder, it can be used in a place which is very restrictive, or, you know, only composed of things that aren't privileged. You know, so that in a way we can retain that perspective, like I said. And then there really is luck, and there really is places for things to choose at any point in time, which I think that if anything could choose anything, then they would choose, you know, propriety, basically. And so then that's sort of how you take the idea of richness and wealth, I think, to a place that is very poor, is first off, by decision. You have to make the decision to do that, you know, on your own, kind of thing. But then I think that you can retain that perspective that you're able to look at things in any situation as with this wonder, that idea of cause, and the word can sort of break free of these conditions and be something which is acceptable in any place. And then again, that goes back to the whole idea of skill and of talent, and whether or not we're just riding on a wave of fate for the moment or the time being, as to our position to be able to contemplate or even wonder such things, you know. But I do think that perhaps maybe then wonder is like one of those good things. Wonder is like one of those innocences. Maybe it is like youth. Maybe it has some relation to nostalgia as well, and memory in that way. And, you know, then maybe we can always say that, you know, wonder can be a work too, because I feel like there's nothing more that a poor place or a place that is only composed of essential components considers but work. And if we can use wonder in such a way, then we create the idea that things can work with it, and it actually can be a process that is understood, basically. And it can be something which can be used to create movement through work. And then in that way, you give things realistic value for multiple different situations and scenarios as to how you do all this. You know, and then it still is always sort of a wonder, right? Maybe to an extent, you've created some place where you feel like you were in control of something, but you know, then you realize that you really don't know everything. But at the same point in time, that's nothing to be feared. You know, the idea of nothingness is nothing to be feared, and it's in fact something which is always behind any perceived emotion that would be harmful in any way. Which is to say that for a moment, you know, perhaps it was up to us, which is maybe what all work relates to again, is that, you know, maybe I've just equated work to a decision again. Work is as basic as a decision. The decision was up to us for a moment. But then maybe in retrospect, it's easier to see kind of how it gets away from us again at that moment, because once we make a decision, we have to let things kind of play out. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you know, then we just sort of have to let go. And man, that gets cold when that sun goes away behind a cloud. And anyways, I think the biggest qualms over most anything is power. And whether or not you feel like you have it, right? Which is kind of funny to me because, you know, if you really have power, then you should be tested, kind of thing. But anybody who's sort of seeking power never really seeks it to be tested. And I think maybe perhaps some part of us is okay with like things being fated to an extent, and maybe not so much chance or choice or decision or having it be on us, because then we can sort of move away from it, and then maybe in that way we can sort of be more like a wonder ourselves. But let's just be sure that, you know, with the thought of that, how I've just kind of gone full circle of, you know, to becoming myself there for a moment here. Is that again, we sort of respect like realities, which, you know, is to never underestimate what something is capable of expressing, basically. Which is to maybe give things just a little bit of time, maybe before we move on and just say that we're a wonder, you know, or whatever. Because maybe we are capable of expressing just one more thing or something else for a moment. Whatever it is. Which is maybe more like not looking at something like it as a work. I mean, obviously we're in the atmosphere of this, so almost no matter what I do at this moment is going to be composed of these elements, so to speak. Then maybe I can sort of effectively demonstrate just a little bit more experience under my tongue, as it were. You know, enjoy the wonder. Don't just be a wonder, you know, kind of thing. But I commonly do come to the challenge of trying to disseminate any sort of miraculous nature around the composition of elements to create an effect with regards to it being something of fate or something of chance or something of work or skill. You know, to anybody who listened to these like vehemently, I think I could do pretty well at just like causing somebody to just fall so ever far into sleep. Like I'm a hypnotist or something, you know. Every time you hear the word wonder, you will be a wonder. Moving through it and in it as much as you're moving to it and to another. Into yourself and outside of yourself. As you wonder just how much a word has its own body and atmosphere, and how much of it should be taken here. Where all things with truth just relate to a time, and perhaps how much of a time we have. So if we really get to the root of all words, we must understand that all things age. Watching clouds move is kind of crazy, actually. innocence is really the only thing we have to lose.
Well, we only ended up with one. They got a little depressing on the coast. Some of the people, yeah, I ran into a lot of, started running into a lot of followers, but most people, if they said no, it's just they didn't have a dog and that was me. There was one lady who thought I was me. I had like great character. No. Yeah. Another lady totally thought I wasn't real. She only had dealt with Steve before. So I said, yeah, cause like I said your name and your dad's name. She's like, that's not Steve. And I was like, the only other person would have been Steve. She's like, yeah, it's Steve who I dealt with. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, she was a groomer or a breeder.
I think I know that guy. I think that's Brady Bird.
Don't record me, please.
Okay. I could say one thing to that person. I would say, you do know that this is not the most conducive environment to train in at this moment. Somehow this feels so good, like on my head. Just like I really am like out in the open, you know? Maybe that's all I'm really sitting here for, is just because it feels good. Some part of it. It's like that negative wonder I was talking about. It's like the comfort of uncomfortability. Just because you know that there is something good about everything, you know? It's like just being able to sort of hold on to that allows you to kind of like maybe experience it for a moment, that there is something to like experiencing something that you wouldn't normally just kind of like sit through or something like that. want to know what all I'm really thinking about is I came to some moment where I think it had to do with the importance of things. Again, it was like trying to discover just something trivial, but then in the exploration of it, you can't help but come to some idea of how important something is anyways. Which sort of gives it that body that I was like talking about. That I think that's why when I was like speaking about it, I then made it in terms of, or I was speaking about it in terms of its relation to real world application. Because I felt like there was something which was almost sort of the more that I tried to uncover this idea of wonder, it was that the thing itself, again, was like a luxury or whatever. But I tried to balance all that out with the whole idea again of relaying it back to chance, which, you know what, is luxury, but with me, it's much more the potential that anything has. It's much more of a choice or something to state, even, or stand by. Which is why I think I worded it the way that I did, where I kind of went around the word almost. Like, stated its relevance in perhaps conversations, maybe something even as important as war, where you say that you can't afford any time for luxury. But again, maybe that's where you could say like this is a negative wonder, you know what I mean? Like, which can maybe I could even define as like being something that is like bad. You know, if I'm functioning off of terms of real numbers and imaginary numbers, then maybe I can use that to sort of allocate like some sort of equivalence with the idea of badness to relate to this idea of luxury, so that whenever I get into, here's some real world applications, so that whenever I get into like some idea, I can create a space for wonder to be there, just in word alone even, that is relevant to a situation, which allows me to retain much more potential and keep things in perspective. And that's why I think I started to delegate like amounts of a thing in relation to the realities at hand. And I think that sort of covers that. And then my real last thing I want to kind of wrap up on here today. I haven't done this in a while. Kind of out here, especially this park, but is how much ownership again of a thing do you take, which maybe is just like pushing, you know, something to the extent of me saying that I'm rolling that pen, as long as I make sure that I go to the point in which I know that I can go to. then it's much more of a living kind of thing. It's much more of a true to life thing, and there's so much to consider. That there's as much to consider about the thing as there is to consider about something that was associated with it at a time. Maybe I can just say, like, I'm just that fucking good. Because you never hear shit like that from anyone else. And if I've written it out like I thought like I think I have, then the better I am at it, the more I give up to chance anyways, and there being power there, which I think is ultimately the reason of fate regardless. So that you can believe.